Hey guys, welcome back to the Dangen. On today's episode, I want to show you how I'm going to calibrate my TK700 BenQ projector. This is a 4K projector with HDR, so I'm going to do two methods, SDR and HDR. Stick around. All right, everybody, thanks again for joining me. Like I mentioned on today's episode, we're going to do some calibration. Now, this is going to be some simple calibration. I'm not going to go through all the steps, but I am going to make it so people that are looking to calibrate or get a little bit better color out of their projectors can follow some simple steps. Now, I do recommend that you get a good idea of what your space is going to be like. So down here in the Dangen, it's going to be very light controlled. And what I mean by that is we're going to be able to turn off pretty much every light and have no ambient light in the background. That's going to help us really be able to see what's on the screen so we can tell which colors need to be adjusted specifically. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use two different benchmarks. The first one is the Spears & Munsil, and this is just for our SDR. If you want, I'll leave a link in the description below. You can purchase this as well. And then this one is for the UHD HDR. This is another Spears & Munsil video. So what I'll do is I'll begin with the SDR, and then I will go through and I will do the UHD HDR, and hopefully we'll see some good end results. So thanks again for tuning into the Dangen. Okay guys, the first thing that I want you to do with your TK700 or other projector is to make sure you zero out everything in your settings. And what I mean by that is go into your contrast, put it to 50%, go into your brightness, put it to 50%, put everything at its stock calibration settings. And that can be done in your menu of your projector, and make sure that if there is a manual calibration mode that you select that also. After you've zeroed everything out, I want you to find a contrast test. Now, if you're using the Spears & Munsil disc like I have here for SDR, that will be in the contrast menu under video calibration. What you're going to do is then follow the directions by turning the contrast on your projector all the way up, and then turning that contrast all the way down, and then finding exactly where it needs to be. In this case, you'll see that the blocks on the white strips will need to be filled in up to the highest point. And once you get to that highest point and you see that block on the highest level, you back it off just a little bit. That should give you your correct number for contrast. Once you've completed the contrast portion, the next step that you'll jump into is for brightness. Now, to do a brightness test, you're also going to have a block screen that's going to be something that will give you a dark and a light side for your display. In this case, with the Spears & Munsil, that's in the brightness tab. However, you can find these charts anywhere on YouTube or even online as long as you're able to project them onto your screen. Once again, turn your brightness all the way up, turn your brightness all the way down, find the medium and indicate exactly where you need to have your brightness in order to see those final two, in this case, those final two bricks on the right-hand side, and then back it off just slightly. It's always recommended after you do the brightness change to go back and just double check that your contrast isn't interfered with too much either. So I usually go back, I double check that the contrast doesn't have a further effect, and typically you can move on to the next step after that. Now we come to the color and tint. With the Spears & Munsil disc, the color and tint will show a screen with 3 colors on the left-hand side and then 2 colors inside boxes on the right-hand side. Calibrating the TK700, I noticed that the Brilliant color slider helped a lot in calibrating and adjusting the color for the color and tint menu on the Spears & Munsil DVD. So please make sure that you do not forget to use that Brilliant color slider to correct for your color and your tint. But for this particular test, you are going to need to use the glasses that is provided, and that's a blue lens. I'll post a link for a blue lens in the description below, so if you feel like buying one and using it for the color and tint test, you can. But what this does is When you use the blue lens, you want to find the exact lens that makes the blocks on the right-hand side disappear. Once that's done and they both meld together, you'll know that you have your color and tint calibrated correctly. After you've completed color and tint, we're going to move into sharpness. For something like a projector, I typically keep the sharpness level on a higher level. In this case, I think I'm going to keep it at about 10. That seems to look the best. What you're looking for particular is if it's too soft, it's almost going to look like your edges of your dark lines are fuzzy, and if it's too sharp, they're going to look very blocky or pixelated. So you want to find a good medium. I like 10 for the TK700. Okay, one of the final steps we're going to do with our SDR calibration is to make sure we understand the color temperature. Using the Spears & Munsil disc, I'm going to pull up the color temperature setting next. This follows suit with the TK700's color temp menu. You'll find that this brings up two different palettes, one on top and one on bottom, going from white to black. Make sure you use this setting to adjust your color temp, whether that be warm, cool, normal, or any other available options through the BenQ device. I settled on normal for my setting, and then I immediately adjusted contrast and brightness to the final stages that I thought the picture looked best. On this slide, you'll find my final calibration settings. Keep in mind that different projectors in different environments bring up different results, but this is what I got in my media center. Now, in order to double check your work, the Spears & Munsil disc does come with some sample material, so you can play some different content and see your colors live in action. Make sure that they fit the need that you were going for. In this case, we have a lighthouse. I think it turned out perfectly fine. I really do like the color settings that come out of the box, but doing this calibration really fine-tuned the TK700 for my environment. Okay, let's move on to UHD HDR. This is a little bit different. For those of you that are using the TK700, just remember that this is a 4K UHD projector that does support HDR10. So we can use the Spears & Munsil disc that does provide for UHD calibration. The first step that we're going to get to is making sure that when you boot up the disc that your projector does indicate that it is displaying a 4K UHD HDR image. It's safe to move on to the first step, which is going to be picking your luminance. And you can begin with the first test, which again is your contrast. Once you begin your contrast, you want to make sure that you turn it all the way up. Then you turn your contrast all the way down and look for those boxes to fill in just enough so then you back them off. After you've completed your contrast section, the next we'll be going to adjust is brightness. Brightness is similar to the SDR calibration. Turn it all the way up, turn it all the way down, wait to find those two boxes on the right. Once the box on the right is showing, make sure that you make the box just next to it on the left-hand side disappear. Here we go again with the color and the tint. Remember, your HDR is turned on at this point, so this will change just a little bit. Now, we already calibrated for SDR. This is calibrating for HDR, so this isn't messing anything up. This is a completely different setting. What we're going to do here is use the same blue light filter. We're going to look through that glass, find the appropriate filter, and then adjust the colors to the two boxes on the right so that they both blend into each other and disappear to the best of your ability. Sharpness is a big difference when you use a 4K projector like the TK700. As you know, more pixels equal a more fine quality image. So in this case, sharpness is very important. Like I mentioned before, you don't want the image to be too soft, but you also don't want it to be too sharp where everything looks like it has an angular, sharp edge. I found that on the sharpness setting for the HDR 4K resolution, 10 was another acceptable range. 7 to 10 is what I found worked best. So you'll have to choose what works best for your environment. And last but not least, we come to the color temperature setting. In this, we are going to watch the colors change from light to dark, dark to light, depending on what one you're looking at. Once again, I did not choose warm, but I chose normal. I do think that the TK700 looked best with a normal color variation. That may change based on your environment, but I definitely love to use this particular calibration technique last. On this slide, you'll find my final calibration settings. Finally, after you complete your initial calibration, you can look through some of the demoed content that comes with the Spears & Munsil UHD 4K HDR disc, and you can see here, it'll show an example of SDR on the right-hand side and HDR on the left-hand side. Hey guys, thanks again for joining me on another episode of The Dangin. If you have any questions about the calibration techniques that I went through in today's video, make sure you post it in the comments below and I'll try and get back to you. Stick around for some more content with the TK700 from BenQ. I have a lot planned with it, and thanks again for joining me.